Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro-Revenge Story. Last month, my trusty old Samsung TV finally died after 7 years of faithful service. I replaced it with a sleek new smart TV, and within a few weeks, I noticed something interesting. Nobody in my family was watching regular TV channels anymore. My kids were glued to Netflix, my wife preferred Amazon Prime, and I had my YouTube Premium subscription. The cable TV subscription seemed like an unnecessary expense. The tricky part was that my TV service was bundled with my phone and internet package through TechWave Communications. It wasn't as simple as just calling to cancel. I had a premium bundle plan with a dedicated customer care team. I spent several frustrating hours on the phone being transferred from one representative to another. I understand you want to disconnect your TV service, sir, but have you considered our special retention offer? The fifth representative asked. No thanks, I just want to disconnect, I replied firmly. The only solution, the representative finally admitted, is to convert your TV connection to prepaid and then let it expire. For the next few weeks, I received daily text messages. Your TechWave TV subscription is expiring soon. Recharge now to continue enjoying premium entertainment. Eventually, I got a message about returning the set-top box. I promptly replied, and within days, a technician collected it. I thought that was the end of it. Then the calls started. Good morning, sir. This is Ann from TechWave Entertainment Services. Your TV subscription needs immediate recharge. These calls were different from my previous interactions with the dedicated service team. After some research online, I discovered that TechWave had outsourced their recharge reminders to third-party call centers. These centers were working from outdated printed lists of subscribers who hadn't recharged, and my mid-month disconnection wasn't reflected in their beginning-of-month database. I tried explaining the situation to every caller, but it was like talking to a wall. That's when I decided to try a different approach. Oh, thank you for calling, I would say. I've been having terrible issues with my TV box. The screen keeps freezing and nobody has helped despite multiple complaints. Let me book a technical support visit for you, sir, one particularly helpful caller said. Within hours, a field technician named Mike showed up at my door. So, where's this problematic TV box, he asked. I offered him a cold drink and explained the situation. We both had a good laugh. Keep doing this, Mike suggested, grinning. Maybe after a few more wasted trips, they'll update their database. I took his advice. Each time I got a call, I'd launch into my rehearsed speech. The TV box isn't working properly. I've complained so many times. After the 8th technical support visit, I finally got a call from a supervisor. Sir, he said, clearly irritated, why do you keep requesting technical support when you don't even have an active connection? I calmly emailed him recordings of all the recharge calls I'd received. He wasn't pleased, but the frequent calls finally stopped. These days, I still get an occasional call every few weeks. I stick to my script, and if they try to schedule technical support, they quickly discover a note on their system. Customer disconnected, do not contact for recharge. The next one is an entitled people story. I still get a rush of satisfaction whenever I drive past my old neighborhood. The memory of what happened there isn't something I'll ever forget, and honestly, I don't want to. Some people might say I should let it go, but when you've been wronged the way I was, getting even feels pretty damn good. This all started about 15 years ago when I bought my first house. It wasn't anything fancy. A modest 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood with good schools nearby. The selling point for me was the backyard. It wasn't huge, but it had these gorgeous rose bushes that the previous owner had tended for decades. There must have been 20 different varieties, all perfectly maintained. I'm not much of a gardener, but those roses spoke to me. Maybe it was because my grandmother had loved roses, or maybe it was just their beauty, but I promised myself I'd take care of them just as well as the previous owner had. What I didn't realize when I bought the place was that the neighborhood had an HOA. The real estate agent mentioned it briefly, but downplayed it completely. Oh, they just make sure nobody paints their house neon green or lets their lawn grow into a jungle, she said with a laugh. The monthly fees were reasonable, so I didn't think twice about it. For the first couple of years, everything was fine. I kept the lawn mowed, maintained the house exterior, and lovingly cared for those rose bushes. They thrived under my attention, blooming beautifully every season. I even won a local gardening award, which I proudly displayed near my front door. Then everything changed when Barbara took over as HOA president. Barbara was in her 60s, with perfectly coiffed hair that never moved, even in strong winds. She always wore these pastel pantsuits and had a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Within a month of taking over, violation notices started appearing in mailboxes all over the neighborhood. Mine came on a Tuesday. Notice of violation, unauthorized landscaping features in backyard, must be removed within 14 days. I was confused. The roses had been there when I bought the place and for years afterward without issue. I called the number on the notice and got Barbara herself. "Those rose bushes are against regulation," she informed me in a clipped tone. Section 8, paragraph 3 of the bylaws clearly states that flowering bushes cannot exceed 3 feet in height. Several of yours are nearly 6 feet. "But they've been here for decades," I protested. "The previous owners had them for years before I moved in, and nobody said anything for the 2 years I've lived here. Previous board members were lax in enforcement. I am not. You have 14 days to comply." I wasn't going to give up that easily. I went through the HOA bylaws with a fine-tooth comb and found nothing specifically limiting the height of rose bushes. There was a vague mention of landscape uniformity, but nothing concrete. I presented my findings at the next HOA meeting, where Barbara shut me down immediately. "The board has interpreted the bylaws, and our interpretation is final. The roses must go." I looked around the room for support, but most homeowners avoided eye contact. A few nodded in agreement with Barbara. Later, I learned she had filled the board with friends and neighbors who owed her favors. I tried compromise. "What if I trim them down to the required height?" "Too late," Barbara replied with that same cold smile. "You've already been issued a violation notice. The bushes must be removed entirely." The thought of destroying those beautiful, healthy rose bushes made me sick. They were part of what made the house special, so I decided to fight. I hired a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. He assured me we had a good case based on the vague wording of the bylaws and the fact that the roses had been grandfathered in for years without issue. Barbara's response was swift and brutal. While my case was pending, she started hitting me with fines for other violations. My trash cans were visible from the street for too long after collection. My holiday decorations stayed up 3 days past the allowed time. My mailbox was half an inch taller than regulation. The fines piled up quickly, and according to HOA rules, unpaid fines could result in a lien against my property. My lawyer advised me to pay them while we fought the rosebush issue, which drained my savings rapidly. The legal battle dragged on for months, costing me thousands. Eventually, the judge ruled in favor of the HOA, citing the broad powers given to HOA boards in their interpretation of bylaws. I was devastated. Not only had I lost the right to keep my rose bushes, but I was now deeply in debt from legal fees and HOA fines. When Barbara sent me a final notice demanding removal of the bushes plus payment of all outstanding fines within 30 days, I couldn't comply. I simply didn't have the money. That's when things got truly nightmarish. The HOA initiated foreclosure proceedings on my house for non-payment of fines. I tried desperately to get a loan to cover everything, but my credit had taken a hit from all the legal expenses. Within 6 months, I lost my house, over some rose bushes that had been there for decades before Barbara decided they violated some arbitrary rule. I was forced to move into a small apartment across town. I drove by my old house a week after moving out and saw workers ripping out the rose bushes, throwing decades of careful cultivation into a wood chipper. I sat in my car and cried. For a while, I was consumed by depression and anger. I'd lost my home, my savings, and a piece of my dignity. But eventually, that anger hardened into determination. I promised myself that someday, somehow, I'd make things right. I focused on rebuilding my life. I got a better job, saved money, and slowly restored my credit. I also kept tabs on my old neighborhood through friends who still lived there. Barbara's reign of terror continued, with more homeowners facing ridiculous fines and violations. 5 years passed before my opportunity arose. I learned that Barbara had stepped down as HOA president due to health issues, though she remained on the board. The new president was more reasonable but largely ineffective against the system Barbara had established. By this time, I was financially stable again and had been studying HOA law in my spare time. I knew that HOA had to maintain proper financial records and follow specific procedures for enforcement. I suspected that under Barbara's leadership, corners had been cut. I hired a private investigator to look into the HOA finances and operations. What he uncovered was better than I could have hoped. Not only had Barbara been selectively enforcing rules against homeowners she disliked, but she had also been misappropriating HOA funds for personal expenses. She'd used the HOA credit card for vacations, clothing, and even plastic surgery, disguising these expenses as community improvements, or administrative costs. The investigator also discovered that several foreclosures, including mine, had been procedurally improper. The HOA had failed to provide proper notice or follow state-mandated steps before initiating foreclosure. Armed with this information, I contacted other homeowners who had lost their homes or faced excessive fines. Together, we filed a class action lawsuit against the HOA and Barbara personally. The legal battle was lengthy, but this time I had both the law and evidence on my side. When Barbara realized the extent of the evidence against her, she tried to settle quickly and quietly. But I wasn't interested in a quick settlement. I wanted my day in court. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Barbara sat stone-faced as her financial misdeeds were laid bare for all to see. Former board members testified about how she had manipulated them into supporting her vendetta against certain homeowners. When the verdict came in, it was everything I had hoped for. The court ruled that the HOA had acted improperly in multiple foreclosures, including mine. Barbara was found personally liable for misappropriation of funds and ordered to pay restitution. The HOA insurance covered part of the settlement, but Barbara had to sell her house to pay her portion. The final settlement restored the value of my lost home plus damages, enough for me to buy a new house in an even nicer neighborhood. One without an HOA, the cherry on top. The court ordered a complete restructuring of the HOA board and bylaws, with an independent auditor to oversee operations for 3 years. Last I heard, Barbara was living in a small apartment across town, ironically in the same complex where I had stayed after losing my house. As for the roses, the new owners of my old house replanted rose bushes in the backyard after hearing my story. They send me pictures every spring when they bloom. Sometimes justice takes time, but when it finally comes, it's sweeter than any rose. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I work in contract security as an armed guard at a major utility company. I pick up extra work on my days off from my main site covering banks that the company I work for has as clients as well. Today, I covered a branch of a large bank that has a white and red logo like stagecoaches and traces their roots back to the mid-1800s. After I was allowed to enter the bank, the branch operations manager gave me a rundown and read me the riot act right off the bat. I had a feeling at that time that this might be a long day. 30 minutes later, a bank customer came in looking lost and said she had an appointment with the banker. I greeted her and told her to take a seat and they'll be with her shortly. That prompted Madam Baum to come out from the back and get on to me for telling the customer to take a seat. Told me that I wasn't allowed to give any direction to anyone coming in, as it could cause problems. Okay, that's reasonable enough. An hour or so later, a man entered the branch with a problem, and he was a bit irate because of his issue. Baum said she could try to help him and ran into issues, which caused him to get more irate, especially since she was not acting very helpful and kept putting the blame on him for something that appeared to be the bank's fault. She came out from behind the teller desk and was looking for a banker to help the gentleman, and while she was wandering around, I engaged him in conversation. He was wearing a Marine Corps hat, and I started chatting with him about what he did in the Corps and other things along that line. She finally figured something out, and instead of calling the gentleman over, she called my name and did a throat slash. After she was finished with the gentleman and wasn't able to help him while still blaming him for the situation, she called me over and proceeded to lay into me about how we had just spoke about talking to people. She said that I'm here for presence only and I'm not here to de-escalate, one of the primary purposes of a security guard, or to speak with the clients. She said that my conversation with the man could cause problems for the bank, despite it not being about the bank at all, and that I wasn't to talk to the customers at all. I asked her if she wanted me to be seen and not heard, and she indicated that's what she wanted from me. She once again threatened to call my supervisor if I had a problem and didn't understand her. Message was received loud and clear. I notified my supervisor of the incident and then decided I was going to comply with her orders to the letter. Cue malicious compliance with me deciding to communicate for the rest of the day with signs, from the limited sign language I know from my wife and friends, and gestures. People would ask me questions and I'd just gesture and point the "to please wait here" sign. People would talk about the weather and I'd just nod. I directed people to stand in line with gestures and nods. This went on until just before noon when the branch manager pulled me into his office with Madam Baum. He proceeded to talk about their concerns and asked me what had happened with the irate gentleman. I filled him in, and it was obvious by his reaction that my version of events didn't match with what Madam Baum had told him. Nevertheless, he proceeded to tell me how I was supposed to do things and that we had to work together. According to the both of them, anything that I say, even not related to the bank or financial matters, can cause problems, and it's best to not say anything, especially to irate customers. Afterwards, as I was leaving his office, I informed him that I'd already let my supervisor know of the situation and that any further issues would be best brought to his attention. I'm half expecting them to call my supervisor to have me removed early, and that will be perfectly fine with me as I never plan to cover this location in the future. I am eating lunch now, but I plan on continuing my malicious compliance after my break ends. I'll be present and do my rounds as I'm supposed to do, but nothing says that I have to greet people or discuss anything with anyone. End of day update. When speaking to my ops manager at the end of the day, he informed me that they requested that I not return to the branch because of how I responded to their request to not speak to the customers. Told him that was fine, as I was going to request to not go back to that branch anyways, and asked if I was getting wrote up. He said that I was in the clear, as it was obvious that I was following the client's instructions to the letter. I know it's probably not a very satisfying conclusion based on a lot of the stories here, but it's a good conclusion in the contract security world when following the client's instruction literally and engaging in malicious compliance. The next one is an entitled people story. So, I, 21M, have been friends with my best friend 21F for 8 years. We initially bonded over having similar crazy home situations with our parents, so our relationship is almost as if we were siblings. However, recently I've been noticing some patterns that I'm not willing to put up with anymore. For starters, we've never been on the same page about finances. I have always been on my own, paid for my own college, clothes, bills, car, everything. I've been working since I was 14. However, she has always been supported by her aunt for occasional money, nothing substantial or life-changing. Her parents aren't responsible or there for her, and I empathize with her for that because it's the same for me too. She has a summer job, not full-time, as a camp counselor for kids. She wants to be a teacher. She also has been putting off getting her license for years and doesn't have a car, so anytime we want to hang out or go somewhere, I am always the one driving and often going out of my way to include her, which up until recently I was happy to do. I started noticing years ago when I would complain about my job, she would never understand what was fair, unfair in a workplace, or the fatigue of working a full week, so I eventually stopped going to her when I would need to rant about work altogether. This is translated into our relationship now as almost not understanding the value of hard-earned money. For example, I feel that I am always expected to put my card down, to buy things when we go to the beach, to pay for a majority of the groceries when we go on a little trip, to drive everyone, and recently when we went out to eat, I put my card down and days later I noticed she didn't pay me back, and when I asked her to, she said, eventually, and sent me a picture of her empty bank account. I asked her over text if she would please let me know ahead of time if she needed to pay me back later because we are both broke college students, and I ended up blowing my tire the next day and immediately was looking at the people who owed me money to pay up. She never acknowledged my text. Granted, none of us should have been going out to eat, learned that lesson the hard way, but it bothered me that she didn't acknowledge or at least say sorry, thank you for picking up the bill. Additionally, I had been helping her practice for her driving test. She finally had scheduled a date for it after I had berated her for months to do it, and it happened to be for the second day of my first full-time job post-grad. I allowed her to use my car to take the test because she didn't have anyone else. We were practicing and she was going away the weekend before the test. We both were free Monday, the day before my first day, and she asked to practice that day. I said I wanted the day for myself because I'm about to work for the rest of my life, to which she said, "So what, I'm just not going to practice?" I told her it wasn't my problem that she felt unprepared. We practiced that day anyways because I'm a pushover, but it bothered me that she ignored my boundary and confirmed that she doesn't understand having a real job. Another example was when we went on a trip to her aunt's house for 4th of July this year. We went to the grocery store, and when it was time to pay, I asked how we were going to split the stuff, and she grabbed the stuff she wanted personally, and I paid for the rest. I paid $70, and she paid $20. I was furious. The next morning, we went out to grab donuts early in the morning, and I paid for the whole group's donuts. $50, there was 8 of us, and she didn't even offer to chip in. Long story short, moments like these have become more common. Recently, she was sick, so I made her a homemade soup with chicken broth that I made, I like to cook, and delivered it to her house. She said thank you, but the next day she texted me that she wished it had more broth. Like, what? I've always been transparent with her when I'm struggling with money, and I know she doesn't have any either, but I'm beginning to get less willing to go out of my way when I don't get acknowledged or thanked often, and I also feel that she's a big girl and can take charge of these things in her life and become less reliant on me. She has a harder life than most, I will give her that, but so do I. There are times when she will give me gas money or pay for the whole group's dinner, but this is very, very few and far between, and I feel that the friendship is still quite unbalanced. How do I set boundaries without ending the friendship? Is she being entitled? Is this intentional? There are good moments in our friendship, although all of this seems terrible. She has been there for me in other ways and understood me when no one has. What do I do? Anyway, thank you.